we are going to transition into our keynote speaker for the afternoon. She is a director, producer, and actress. She was adopted from South Korea into a family from New Jersey. And then in 2013, she was reunited with her identical twin sister, who was adopted into a family from France. She continues to pursue all realms of the entertainment industry and raise awareness for the greater adoption community. Some of you may have heard her talking. She's super, super sweet. We are so lucky to have her today. So please help me welcome Sam Futerman.
Hi. Wow, that was a really nice introduction. Thanks. So I wanted to talk to you today. We're just going to talk a little bit about my story, and I don't know if any of you have been able to see the documentary that I made with my sister and some of my very closest friends, but if you haven't, that's okay, because I'm going to just talk a little bit about what happened and kind of this crazy happenstance that really just forever changed my life, and then kind of talk about my own experience with adoption and my sister's as well. She would have joined us, but it's late where she is, and spoiler alert, she just had a baby recently. So she is, she has her hands tied. She's pretty busy at the moment, and probably a little kind of has a bit of a lack of sleep. But thank you. I will send congratulations. Oh, this is fun to chat because I can see. Ooh, that's going to be distracting for me. This is fun. But yeah, she's doing she's doing really amazing. And so otherwise she would be here because she would, I'm sure, like to talk to all of you. But anyway, so now just to give you a brief kind of history about who I am as an adoptee. I was born in Busan, South Korea. I was 4 months old. I was adopted to a family in Jersey through Spence Chapin. And I was raised with two older brothers, Matt and Andrew. They are my parents' biological sons as well. My father's name is Judd, and my mom's name is Jackie. My dad's Jewish. My mom is Catholic. And, you know, I had a pretty good childhood. Pretty normal, I would say, really easy, grew up with a really nice group of friends. And then around my teen years, I kind of fell in love with performing arts, specifically musical theater. Like some of you were talking about, I was a total geek and went to theater camp every year. And I ended up going to a high school for performing arts in Manhattan, and then eventually went to college for theater as well. And I graduated from BU in 2009 with a degree in theater arts and a minor in anthropology. And then after that, I moved to LA and I started to kind of pursue my acting career in Korean entertainment. So that's kind of where all the fun stuff starts. So in February 2013, I was living in LA and I was getting ready for a movie premiere, a movie called 21 and Over, and I received a message on Facebook, and it was from a girl named Anise Bourdier, and when I pulled up her profile photo, it looked exactly like me, and I actually thought it was my photo at first, and then I clicked into it and I saw that, oh yeah, she's a real person, she has like an actual profile, it wasn't a catfish situation. So I clicked on and then her message popped up. And I am going to read you what the message said. It says, "My name is Anise. I am French and live in London. About 2 months ago, my friend was watching one of your videos with Kev Jumba on YouTube, and he saw you and thought that we look really similar, like very, really similar. We were making jokes about it, etc. Today, he saw the trailer of 21 and Over and told me he saw you again. I then checked your name on the cast, stalked you a bit, and found out you were born on the 19th of November, 1987. I checked more of your videos and then came upon how it feels to be adopted and discovered you were adopted too. So I don't want to be too Lindsay Lohan, but how to put it, I was wondering, where were you born? I was born on the 19th of November, 1987 in Busan, but my papers were made at the Holt Children's Institute. So officially I was born in Seoul. My Korean name is Kim Eun-hwa. I arrived in France the 5th of March, 1988, so 3 months later. You can check my Facebook if you want to check the pictures and the videos. It's more obvious on videos. Let me know. Don't freak out. Lots of love. Anise." So this is the message I get, and I'm kind of in the midst of doing my nails and all this stuff and getting ready, and I didn't respond, and she thinks it's the weirdest thing in the world. I actually didn't say like, "Hi, how are you? How's your day?" I instead just sent a photo of my birth records that I had from the adoption agency, because I had just been back on a homeland tour of Korea a few months prior to that. So I actually sent her the records, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, I'm going home this weekend. I'm going back to Paris. I'm going to get my papers and I'll send them back to you." And that's kind of how our conversation, the first conversation that we had, started. It turns out we're identical twin sisters. We were separated at birth and adopted to different families in different countries. And we grew up on complete opposite sides of the world. We had no knowledge of each other until the internet brought us together. Even when I had went to Korea the few months before that, I checked my records. There was no mention of anything in them, of, even hinting at the fact that I had a sibling, let alone identical twin sister. There are some like bits and pieces, like maybe I had like an older sister or something like that in the records, but nothing that would have pointed towards having an identical twin that I had no idea about. So anyway, she was adopted to France at 3.5 months old through Holt International. And she grew up in Neuilly, which is a really fancy part of Paris. She's pretty lucky. It's a lot nicer than New Jersey, I'll tell you that. And she grew up as an only child. Her parents' names are Jacques and Patricia Bordier. So very French and very fun. They're really, really nice people too. And whenever I go over there, they treat me like their second daughter, which is really fun. I actually, a few years ago, my sister and I were supposed to meet in London to do this interview, and I got appendicitis. And I couldn't fly back to the States because I had gone under anesthesia, so I couldn't fly for 2 weeks. So we took a train back to France. Her parents took care of me for those 2 weeks, and I stayed in their apartment, and it was really fun. But now I don't have to worry about having an appendix, so that's good. So my sister and I, the first day that we actually contacted each other successfully was February 21st, 2013, which is also my dad's birthday, which is a fun fact. And we finally met in person in May of 2013. So for those days before we actually got to meet in person, we were talking all the time on WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, really every form of social media that existed then. We were kind of chatting on. Oh, nice! February 21st is your birthday. That's awesome. Oh, this is fun. I'm like kind of being able to see what you're all saying too at the same time. But yeah, so we were always talking to each other the entire time, every day. The second I woke up until the moment I fell asleep, we were always chatting and just getting to know each other. And we kind of realized how similar that we were. And I guess being an adoptee, I always, in a way, to attribute to my parents how much I loved them and how much they're justified family. There's no ifs and or buts. I always thought that nurture was everything. But now, after meeting my sister, I'm also realizing that who we are innately and our DNA actually does have a lot to do with who we are as well. And that's why, it's important to kind of learn about those parts of our lives as well. And we realized how similar we were, and it was to the point that we thought it would be even crazier if we weren't twins, especially identical twins, because we were so similar. I mean, we have the same exact laugh. It's super creepy because when we both laugh at the same time, it's like this bizarre echo thing that happens. And we even do it now. And we both get into these weird laughing fits where we can't stop. And yeah, it's just bizarre, just looking at yourself in the weirdest mirror, or it's like a glitch in the system or something like that. But we did still get a DNA test just to be sure that we were twins. And I guess it was more for peace of mind and everything, just to make sure, because, there's always this fear that we'd be let down if it wasn't. But again, I think we felt in our gut that we knew that we were identical twins. and before we met in person, it was this like magical time of getting to know each other. It was like falling in love over the internet pretty much. And she wrote me a text message just one time and says, she goes, so I want to write miss you, but then I realized that we haven't met really. And that kind of encompasses a lot of how we felt at the time, because, you know, we just knew each other so well and we're able to connect at any moment in the day. And it's probably given us a lot of practice for how we're all living now, kind of with the social distancing and everything, and not seeing your friends, that you can have really great conversations and relationships and meaningful, and eventually they will be in person, but for the moment now, they're not. So then in May 2013, we actually got to meet for the very, very first time in person. And the funny thing is, everyone always says, like, did you run into each other's arms and cry and just like break down and have this crazy emotional moment? And the truth is that we didn't. It was actually really, really awkward. She likes to explain it that it was kind of like the opposite sides of magnets. Like they're kind of drawn to each other, but once you get too close, you can't, there's like a force field you can't really break. So that's how she explains it, but it's actually kind of like we were social distancing before that was a thing. It was like, you know, we were keeping 6 feet of space between each other for 45 minutes, kind of like dancing around each other, trying to figure out how to be comfortable around each other. But then after that, it was just kind of like game over. It was like we were best friends from that moment on. And that night, it was, we got our results from our DNA test back, and it came out that we are identical twins. And it was like a really nice breath of fresh air to take that relief off, you know, and just to know that what we had been assuming the entire time. And I stayed in London for 10 days, and it was super, super fun. We got to go to Harry Potter Studios. We saw a show in the West End. I actually got to see her graduation fashion show from college as well, and we just toured everywhere. And our families were all in tow. So my parents, my brothers, her parents, and all of our friends. And we were filming our documentary at the time. And luckily, the documentary crew was my circle of closest friends at the moment, and still is to this day. And I'm actually engaged to our co-director and cinematographer. So it was like a really big, loving kind of time for us. And it was kind of even shows how expansive family can be. And, you know, as adoptees, we always think that, you know, family for us isn't the traditional sense or what people think it can, or what people think it is, really, right? So for adoptees, it's so much more. It's complicated and wonderful, and it just shows, I think that our time in London kind of showed us how expansive family really could be. That all of a sudden it's like, not only do I have this sister, a biological sister, but I also have, you know, my sister's mom. And when I talk about Patricia that way, it can be like confusing almost, because you're like, hey, wait, what? Your sister's mother? But that's kind of how expansive all the branches go, and they're all rooted in the same thing, in family and all of that. And something I never imagined that could happen, but then all of a sudden there it was, you know. And even to this day, Anise and I keep in touch all the time. We're always kind of planning when we're going to see each other next. And after we met for the first time, I think we visited each other maybe 4 or 5 times that next year. She came to California. I went to France. We spent our first birthday together. It was super, super special. And we even went to Korea, kind of for a homeland tour and for the International Korean Adoptees Association conference, which was really fun. And it was a pretty moving experience for the both of us. But, you know, my sister and I, we talk every single day. It's been 7 years since we met for the first time, and our families are super close even to this day. It's like to the point where I will tell my sister something. I live in LA. I'll tell my sister something late at night. I'll text her, then go to bed, right? So my sister will tell her mother what I told her. And then her mother will email my mother. And my mother lives in New York, so she'll wake up and know information before I've had the chance to tell her. And then I get in so much trouble for not telling her first. And it's like this crazy loop of things, but that's really fun because, you know, we're all just this huge extensive family unit. But it's super cool. I mean, like, it's kind of fun too. We can like get each other in trouble because we didn't have that experience growing up. And it's like part of that is it's interesting because we missed out technically on 25 years of being together. You know, we missed our whole childhood, all the years that you guys are living right now. We had no idea that the other one was there. But a lot of people, they'll ask us, you know, what, did you miss that? Or do you wish that you had been raised together? And for my sister and I, we always say no, because that's only a quarter of our lives. And we have the other 3/4 to continue on and keep learning about each other and to extend our family, you know, even more than it already is. And now we're older and we're adulting, and we're thinking about starting our own families as well. And she has a leg up on me because she gave birth to her son. And he was actually born, this is a weird and fun, fateful fact, but he was born on the same exact day that my sister and I met in person for the very first time, which is like wild to think about because the odds of that happening are very, very small. And my sister went into labor pretty early considering, and she was in labor for about 30 hours. And when he finally decided to make his way into the world, it happened to be on that day. So it could have happened the day before that, but it was a fun kind of fateful reminder of how everything kind of plays out in this world. It's also weird to think that, you know, and without the internet, that we may have never been able to meet. And, you know, without the internet, we wouldn't, you know, all of us wouldn't be able to be here and be talking to each other. And it's wild to think about all of those things and to think about how, you know, life could be so different than it is right now, than it is in this moment. And it's hard sometimes, I think, as an adoptee to not imagine the other part of the universe, kind of not to imagine the what if, like what if we were raised together, my sister and I, or what if we were raised together and then with our biological family, or what if I wasn't raised American and she wasn't raised French, or what if it was swapped, and what if I was raised in France and she was raised American, you know, and to tell you a little bit about that, to think about kind of our birth family story and the birth family situation. My sister and I reached out to our oh, this is funny. Do you ever feel like there was a part of you missing that there, or that there was something incomplete in your life before meeting your sister? Funny, I'm actually, yeah. So when we reached out to our birth mother, it was unsuccessful. We weren't able to contact her personally, and that always exists for us, right? We know that somewhere there exists a person in this world that nurtured us and loved us for 9 months, and we know that she's alive, but we may never actually know who she is, and we may never have this joyous reunion as we did with ourselves, but whoever she is and wherever she exists, we feel like we're really grateful for her and for what she's provided us, which is the gift of life and all kind of the treasures that come with it. And to answer your question, which is so relevant my sister didn't always feel positive towards our birth situation, and I never maybe really thought about it too deeply, or it wasn't something that really bothered me when I was a kid necessarily. But my sister didn't always feel that way. She kind of almost felt as though she was given up for adoption, and it was maybe because, you know, she was a person's problem almost. And then due to infertility or whatever was going on with her parents at the time, that they couldn't naturally have a baby, she felt like, okay, well, now I'm the solution to that person's problem. And as a child, she said that she didn't know if she was just missing me, because we're identical twins and she thinks that we have twin superpowers. Whereas she didn't know if she was missing something because it was because she was an only child, or if it was because she was an adoptee and just knew that there was something else out there. You know, as adoptees, we know that we have to be related to someone. We had to come from someone biologically. So that always exists. And it's not something that we don't go about our days like dwelling on and thinking like, oh man, all of that happens. But it is something that just is present in our lives, you know, and even now it's still present in our lives. My sister kind of felt that she was abandoned. And she always said that her birthday was the day she arrived in France, not necessarily the day of her birth that's recorded on her birth records. And I always thought that that was kind of a beautiful thing, because it's attributing how much love that she has to her parents and to her family, and is saying like, my life started with you, you know. But when we went to Korea, we were able to contact our foster parents, and they were separate foster parents, and we had this really amazing meeting in time. And my sister was really moved, and she thought that her thought kind of changed, her thought process about it. You know, before it was something that she wanted to forget or ignore the time before she arrived in France. But by seeing these foster parents and the women who, you know, held us in their arms, knowing that it was only a temporary situation, but continued to nurture us and keep us safe and healthy until we were able to be sent to our family. My sister totally realized that yeah, every moment counts, and no matter kind of how you get there. And I kind of feel like maybe one day we will find out what happened, you know, why we were separated and who did it. And, you know, I trust personally that if we do find that information out, that we'll be able to handle it then, and it'll change us. I feel like maybe if I had found the information out a few years ago, I don't know what I would do. Or I felt like I was ready to know it, or I wanted to know it. But then it's kind of also that feeling of like, oh, now that I'm looking back, maybe I wouldn't have been able to handle it. Maybe it wouldn't have been the right time. So I feel like I'm now at a point where I can trust that if it does happen, then it'll be the right time, you know? And for me, I know that it's kind of a coping mechanism for myself, but it's also nice to not always know every single detail to that backstory, to the life and the reasoning behind why our birth mother gave us up. And in a way, for me, it kind of leaves a lot of room for hope. And for now, my thought process is I like to think that my birth mom is like a superhero somewhere, and she's just like fighting all the bad guys, and that if I knew who she was, then it would reveal her hidden identity and I would ruin, you know, the resistance. So in my mind, I feel like she needs to remain hidden. And I know it sounds really silly for me to think of it that way, and sometimes it's a bit of a naive kind of approach to it all. But my sister and I kind of make a very conscious choice to look to the positive and to look towards what else life has in store for us, instead of dwelling in all of that what if, because the past is something that we can't change at all. But looking forward to the future, we can make changes to our lives and to everyone else's lives. And looking towards the positive isn't always easy. And I don't think that it's easy right now in the world that we're living in, because it's 2020. And to say that this year is tragic would be an understatement, because we're all fighting for freedom and justice for people who were needlessly murdered, right? Like, I wouldn't have ever expected to be living in this day and age where we're fighting for equality. We're fighting to prove that Black Lives Matter. We're fighting against the thought that someone isn't worthy of life because of something they're fully unable to control, like the color of their skin or the shape of their eyes, or the fact that for Black people in the US, that their ancestors were brought here against their will, and years later, they're still unable to be free. And on top of all of that, like on top of all this heavy stuff that we're dealing with, we're also dealing with a health crisis that is resulting in hate crimes towards Asian Americans. I know a lot of you are Asian Americans and people of color as well. And it's hard to imagine that there is something positive to look for when this is our reality. And I think that being adoptees, our identity is super, super complex. We're a subculture of a subculture, and we just don't fit into the typical mold, right? Like, we're not here nor there. Like, for me, I'm not Korean, but I'm not American, but I am. And I am both of those things. And I'm a woman and all of those things as well. But it's hard to find where exactly we fit in. And it's also complicated too, because, some of us have had privileges and especially have experienced white privilege as well, because some of our family members are white, right? So I was able to grow up in a really good neighborhood and go to a really good school. But yet when a stranger sees me, I can still be ostracized against because of what I look like. We're American and still we're kind of also getting blamed for the coronavirus, and people keep saying stuff like, go back to where you came from. And I think what hits me really hard these days is that people say that stuff, and being an inter-country adoptee, it strikes me really, really hard, because they say that kind of stuff and they don't know that I didn't have a choice. I don't have a choice of where I was born. I don't have a choice of where I was sent. And I am American and I'm adopted, and it's complicated, But I feel like being adopted is also really beautiful. And I have had a majority, and I know this is also a privilege, and also I'm really lucky, but I've had a majority of really wonderful experiences with adoption. And I think that family is really beautiful, and it can be, and it's not always this like conventional or really perfect thing that can be kind of wrapped up in a bow. It's family grows and continues to change, and it takes time. And I just think that one thing that we can choose in this life is to not let the complications of our identity and all the world kind of overtake us, because I just think the world has a lot of better things to offer, and we can't let the past define who we are, like we can't forget what happened as adoptees, right? We can't forget the fact that we were born someone else and brought here and raised here. It's there to serve us as a reminder, of where we came from and where we still need to go. And my sister and I, we consciously make a choice to not dwell in what has been. And we're always choosing to kind of look towards the future. And we believe that, we are who we are because of every single moment in our lives, even and especially the ones that we can't control. And I don't know about you, but I shouldn't speak for her, but I can't wait till I'm an old person, right? Like, I can't wait until I have children and grandchildren, and I'm telling them how cool we were and that we met on Facebook, and I can show them our documentary and our story and tell them about what the world was like now, And I also know that Facebook will not be cool in the future, and it probably isn't even cool to you guys, but but it was cool at the time when my sister and I met. And you know, like, I'm only a third of the way through my life, and I still have a lot more to learn, and there's so much more that I feel like I have to do and to look forward to and fight for. And I just feel like we can't ignore the past, right? We can't ignore the struggles or the success. We have to know who we came from and who we are, and just never accept complacency, and just never surrender to the fact that this is just how it is, right? Like, some people say, like, well, that's how it is, you got to move on, you know, and don't dwell on it. But I feel like we can't do that. We need to keep pushing forward and always just say, like, there's more to be done, because anything that you have in this life, and when people say, like, oh, that's just how it is, the fact is it's not. And I know that for a fact. My life changed in a second, but like, just by clicking into my sister's message, my entire life was like flipped upside down. And I feel like never in your life should you ever feel like this is it, like this is how it's always going to be, because it's not. And like, maybe some of you will not find identical twins, and it's also very possible that some of you might also find that you have identical twins, because I've met a couple other people who have. But our lives are always and constantly changing, and just know that no matter what's happened, that life continues to get better. But it is a conscious choice to think about that and think of it in that way, that it will keep getting better, and that you have the ability to change, and you have the power to make those changes. And I don't know, I choose to look to the future and to all possibilities and to hope. And I feel like when I look at the future, I'm literally looking at all of you in this chat on these pages of the Skype, and I just feel like you all have the power to make this world a better place for everybody in it, and for me, and for my children, and my sister's baby, especially now. You know, we all have the power to just continue on and move, and find that in a few years, when all of this stuff is over, that we'll have been a part of it and made it a really good place for us all to be in. But anyway, that's just all the stuff that was on my mind over the past few days, and just wanted to share kind of a bit about my story and all of that. And now I'm going to go scroll through and talk about kind of your questions, or put any questions that you have. And they can be really personal too, if you want, about my sister and about us and all of that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to my story, and I'm going to try to scroll through.
Real fast, can we all give a round of applause to Sam for sharing her story and being so vulnerable with us, and her perspective of really embracing her expression and the positivity.
Yay!
So good.
Thank
This
you.
was a really good talk.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm at the first question. Oh, that was Natalie's question. If you ever felt like we were missing, we kind of talked about that. Do I think I would have had the same connection with the sibling that's not your identical twin? I think maybe not. I think my sister and I being identical twins, and the fact that this was the first biological sibling that I had ever met, I think it made it even more special, kind of, in a way. I think that I would 100% love a sibling that wasn't an identical twin just as much as I love my sister. But there is something, I think, a little bit special about us being identical twins, because we actually have the same DNA. So like, technically her son biologically is also my son, because we were like split from the same egg, which is kind of super trippy to think about. But yeah, I think I would 100% love a biological sibling just as much as I love my sister. But I think the connection that we have is also something that's pretty remarkable and pretty special, just because we share so much actual DNA. But yeah, I love seeing this about gotcha days. Yeah, those are awesome. My friend Jenna she calls her gotcha day her plain day, which is really fun. Let me go down. There's another question. Oh, if you had found out after the DNA test that she was not your biological sister, would you have felt discouraged? Does having her now make you feel whole, or like you found the missing piece in your life? I think maybe if I found out that she wasn't biologically related to me, I think I might have been a little sad. Yeah, I think I would have been. Maybe my perspective on that will change later on, but I think, yeah, I might have been a little bit kind of sad, but also the experience itself and kind of how we met and how we found each other was so unique that I think maybe that would have distracted me a little bit. And I know as a person, kind of generally speaking, I always try not to get my hopes up too high, because like I'm kind of scared of being let down in a way, you know? And because like I always think about things so positive and like, this is the only way it's gonna go. Like it's gonna be the best. We're gonna be twins and it's gonna be the best thing in the whole world. But then I guess I do realize too that I messed up my thing, that yeah, it's possible that it could not have happened as well. And I feel like maybe I never felt like I wasn't whole. Sorry, the end of the question was, does having her now make you feel whole, or like you found this missing piece in your life? And I feel like I never felt necessarily like I was missing something as much as my sister did. And again, we talk about, you know, how she felt that way maybe because she was an only child. I never necessarily felt that as strongly, maybe because I was just trying to get my brothers out of my room all the time. I was like, leave me alone. I was actually trying to be left alone more than I think my sister was. But so I don't think that not finding her would have made me less whole necessarily. I think that if I had never met her, I still would have had a pretty good life, and I still would have been thinking about adoption pretty positively, because I have an amazing family and I've been so lucky in that. But I feel like now that I've found my sister, life is just kind of, it's like the icing on the cake in a way, you know? It's like, oh, right. Things are like, I already thought the world was pretty cool, and now I think it's really cool. It's like even better. But I don't necessarily, like, my life wouldn't have been terrible if I hadn't met her. It still would have been pretty good, but now it's just like even better. Okay, I'm just going more. Okay, more questions. What was the most surprising responses you received from Twinsters? I think one of the most surprising responses was my sister and I, when we premiered our documentary at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and we were standing outside of the theater just kind of like soaking it all in a little bit, and a woman came up to us on the street and just said, "Hey, I just saw your movie and I just want to tell you I'm a birth mother." And I'm gonna get emotional. She was just like, she's like, "I just want to let you know that you've always been loved." And like, that's never even been a question. And that like, that like, my sister and I were just like, wow, you know, because we only know from our perspective and we don't know from theirs. And that was like so moving. And I think that sharing our story, and I feel like kind of telling people what we've been through, people also feel like they can then share their story and tell us more intimate things than you know, sometimes we can even say to each other. And I think that was one of the most surprising but also amazing and moving responses that we had ever gotten, for sure. Yeah, that was, it was almost like the world gave us like a little gift that day, you know, just by this stranger. And we'll never see that woman again, but it's something I'll remember for the rest of my life, you know. Okay. what are your views on how adoption can be romanticized? Oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's super cool. I think adoption, I think sometimes, you know, when, especially being in the entertainment business, it's funny how the views on adoption are kind of different than how we've all experienced it. And I think especially when we look into our portrayal or into like Hollywood's portrayal of adoption, it's really interesting because it's never really told from our viewpoint, right? It's never told from like the strength of who we are as the adoptees. And maybe it's because, you know, a lot of adoptees aren't necessarily that much older than I am, you know, and so maybe it's just that we haven't had our chance to kind of share our stories. But I feel like in the entertainment business, people, a lot of adoptions portrayed as like the saviors of the parents and how they saved these orphans and all of that. And for me, I always kind of look at that, and not that it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, but it also kind of just looks at the parents always as being the superhero and the savior and this like amazing person. And that's not to say that they aren't. Like, our parents are awesome and they are superheroes and they are amazing. And I feel like, but so are we. We are also really amazing. And if I hadn't been adopted, it's always like, well, if you hadn't been adopted, then like, where would you be? You'd be like on the street doing this or that. And like, that's not necessarily the case, because don't downplay the fact that we are all pretty amazing, strong individuals. So if we hadn't had the family, maybe we would still have been able to handle ourselves. You know what I mean? But the fact that we were so lucky and so privileged to be adopted into an amazing family and have this family that we do now, that we are all growing up with and love unconditionally, our lives just took a different turn. But I think adoption can be kind of like, can be funny when it's portrayed, and especially, yeah, when it's kind of put in that perspective, especially in Hollywood. You know, everything is kind of like romanticized in a way, and it's not always in the favor of for us, you know. But that's why it's also important for like all of you to if you feel like compelled to tell your story and to share your own stories, because and that's a part of the reason why I was so excited about Adopteen, is because it's like run by adoptees as well. So it's like for all of us together, you know, and it's not being told from an outside perspective or anything like that. Yeah, I think that's something that I kind of think about a lot. Let's see, some more things. Ooh, I love the Harry Potter quote. We both have light and dark sides in us. It's just what we do with them. It's so true. I love that so much. Do you think you would have had the same connection with a sibling that's not your identical twin? Oh, we already talked about that, right? When you first met, what language did you speak to each other? So my sister's a smart one. I don't speak French yet. I'm learning on Duolingo, but it's really hard because everything sounds the same, but it's spelled differently. It's really hard for me. I'm trying very, very, very hard. I thought that, you know, if quarantine has done anything for me, it's given me the ability to spend more time to try to speak French. But luckily, my sister is an incredibly intelligent human being and is bilingual. So she speaks in English to me. Even now, I'll try to speak French, and sometimes she gets frustrated and just starts speaking to me in English. But yeah, I think we also eventually both want to try and learn Korean too. I think that interest kind of sparked with us and with our obsession with Korean food. And it's like the ability to read a Korean menu would be really awesome, or to be able to kind of like know all of those things and go grocery shopping and be like, all right, this is the right product, all of those kind of things. But yeah, I am very lucky that my sister is a lot smarter than I am. What did you learn about yourself after you met my sister? Oh my God, I learned so much about myself after meeting my sister for the first time, because it's like a mirror, like a live human mirror when you're seeing each other for the first time. First thing I learned was how small I actually am in real life, because I am just under 5 feet tall. And when I saw her, Kelsong, who was her best friend, is like a really big guy. And when I saw them walking together for the first time down the street, I was like, oh man, I am so small. And I totally just have this terrible Napoleon complex. And I think I'm like a huge, like I can take on anything. But, and I feel like I can, I just physically, I have some limitations because of how petite I am. But yeah, that was definitely the first thing that I learned. Also, I learned about how much of an emotionally driven person I kind of am, and that I can kind of get heated really fast. And oh, Tina, she doesn't like the UPS truck, my dog. Tina. But yeah, I think with our emotions, my sister like got really mad at her mom one time and was just like all of a sudden like yelling at her. And I took a moment, because I saw so much of myself in that, of like how quickly frustrated I can get with my mom and how short I would be all of a sudden. But she'd be like, oh, why'd you say it like that? And I saw my sister do it, and I was like, oh man, I do the exact same thing. And that was like kind of a very huge learning moment on how I should be a lot nicer to my mother and control my emotions a little bit more. Those are a couple things that I learned. Do you think family, how you're raised, affected what you think of your adoption and a positive, negative outlook on it? I think adoption and our viewpoints about adoption, I think it's complex. I think it goes both ways. I think our families, I think it did have an effect a little bit on who we are, especially seeing kind of the difference between my sister and I. My sister had a bit more of a negative approach, and I'm not sure if it was because she was an only child or just because, in France, adoption's a little bit different. I guess it is all, adoption is different all over the world. But when you think about that, for my sister and in France, I guess the idea is that you adopt only if you can't have biological children of your own. And so again, when I was kind of talking about my sister feeling like she was a problem or the solution to another person's problem, I think that has a lot to do with that. Because, and now, she's come to realize that that wasn't necessarily the case, that, we're loved way far and before we're even born, and even before her mother knew she was going to adopt her mother loved her, and knowing that I'm coming to the age where I'm going to start, wanting to start my own family. I know I love my children, and I don't even have them yet. They're not even anywhere near in the near future. I'm not like pregnant or anything, but I love my future children, and I don't even know who they're going to be or who they are. So I think that it does have an effect. I think the community that surrounds adoption has a pretty big effect. And, for us to be able to talk to our siblings, even about that, because some of us might have adoptive and non-adoptive siblings. So I think it's important to talk about. I had a really positive upbringing, and I was also I went to kindergarten with another Korean adoptee. and we grew up in the same town, and I think maybe that gave me a bit of a relief, because I mean, I don't know for all of you, but just even having that one other person to know, like, oh yeah, there's other people that exist like me. And you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, you know, so we couldn't sign in and find adoptees across the US. It was just kind of only within an arm's reach. So having, I think, that one other person that was a Korean adoptee really kind of helped my positive outlook on it a bit. The steps my sister and I took to contact my birth mom. So for Korean adoptees, the process is a bit more streamlined than for other inter-country adoptees. Everyone goes through CAS, Korean Adoption Services, and we reached out to our adoption agencies, so Holt International and Spence Chapin, and we requested to do a birth search. So that's how it all kind of fell into place and went down. And for those of you who don't know, for Korean adoptees, there's like similar to what a social security number is. So they found that, and it had matched on both of the adoption papers, and they reached out to that person, and she said it wasn't me, that it was the wrong person. So again, not sure if that was denial on her part, or if it maybe just wasn't the right person. You know, for Korean adoption, back in the 80s, there were so many babies being adopted at that time. In my year alone, there was over 5,000 Korean adoptees sent overseas. So a lot of the records aren't necessarily pristine, and a lot of the reasoning on them aren't fully accurate. And I've heard other stories from other Korean adoptees that they contacted the woman who's listed on it, but that woman was actually paid to give her information to hide the identity of the actual birth mother. So, you know, there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of questions still surrounding the contact of our birth family. So we don't know if we've actually have been able to contact that actual person or not. But yeah, that's kind of how we went about our personal birth search. And for Korean adoptees, again, Korean adoption started after the Korean War. So Korean adoptees are a bit older than Chinese adoptees and other inter-country adoptees. So hopefully it will be a little bit more streamlined for other countries soon to be able to make that possible. But if any of you are interested in that, you can always talk to your camp counselors, and you can always email me and stuff like that. And I might have a little bit more information depending on the countries and all of that kind of stuff. And there's also a possibility to go by route of a private investigator is also a possibility to do some research if that's of interest. But yeah. I'm curious if you ever told Kev Jumbo about your story and how his video helped to bring you both together. Yeah, Kevin and I don't know, some of you are Kev Jumbo was like an OG YouTuber. If you're a little bit older, you might know who he is, but otherwise he probably isn't relevant anymore. But I'm actually still friends with him. And yeah, I talk to him about this all the time, and how truly grateful I am for him. And again, life is all about timing, right? It's all about being in the right place at the right time. And who knows who defines that for you? If it's the universe, if it's yourself, if it's, you know, a higher up, who's to say who is the person who gets to put all those things in place for us. But I am really grateful for him. And it's funny, on 21 and Over, I met Justin Chon, the actor, and we actually took the same exact cast van back to the hotel when we were filming by chance, totally random. And we just started talking and we connected because we were both Korean. And he was like, well, I'm going to go out to eat. Do you want to come out and see? So I was like, sure. Yeah, I'll go out because I'm staying by myself. I didn't have any friends in the area. So we went out for a drink and really bonded over being Korean American actors and being Asian American actors. And then months later, he called me and was like, oh, I want to put you in this movie I'm making with my friend Kev Jumba in Hawaii. So why don't you come down and shoot that movie with me? So I did. And I became really good friends with Kevin. When we got back to LA, he was like, you know what? I want to put you in one of my YouTube videos. So I was like, sure, why not? And then he did, and that's the video that my sister saw. And then the movie 21 and Over was a trailer that she saw and was able to look up my name. So the chain of events that had to happen for that moment to have been possible is pretty insane. Because if anything, you know, if Justin had taken a cast ban 15 minutes later, 15 minutes earlier, I would have never had that conversation with him. We would have never met. And life wouldn't have been unfolded as it did. So I do talk to Kevin. I do tell him how truly grateful I am for him and his presence in my life. And he's doing really great, by the way. He's a pretty awesome and really kind human being. If you're wondering about that. Do you feel like you view adoption differently than your sis? Further, do you think it has a different influence on how you view your identity? I think we did view adoption differently before meeting each other. I think now we have a lot of the same viewpoints on adoption because we've been through a lot together, and maybe it's because we have the same brain. But yeah, we have a pretty similar view on adoption now, I would say. Do you think it has a different influence on how you view your identity? I think our identities, the differences in our identities might stem more from the fact that she's French and I'm American, and how much she does not want to be American. But yeah, I think our identity might be more different, not necessarily with adoption, but I think in a more national kind of viewpoint is where we differ. Korean dishes, my favorite. I think kimchi pancake. I'm really sad that I missed your workshop the other day because that's definitely one of my favorite things. I also really love, oh my God, of course, now I'm blanking on the name of it. It's like it's a beef, like a spicy beef stew, Korean beef stew. And there's a really good place in LA that makes it, and they put cheese on top and then they torch the cheese so it's melted. So you get this like traditional Korean short rib stew with melted cheese on top, and it's literally the best thing. When I am sad, I eat Korean food. It's like well known in the household that we get Korean food, and we actually go to the Korean grocery store like once a month because I can't eat Whole Foods kimchi. It's just not the same, and it's very expensive when kimchi should not be expensive. So we always go to the Korean market, and I feel like every place I choose to live in this world will need to be close to a Korean grocery store. Do you feel like you view adoption differently? Oh, why am I saying the same? Oh, you're 4'10". Technically, I'm also 4'10", Jade. But I say that I'm 5 feet, but I'm actually 4'10" too. Let's see. Yeah, my dog's name is Tina. She's a corgi. I adopted her as well, so we bond over that. She was actually a DMT dog, so a dog meat trade corgi, and so we got her through a pet adoption agency. Let's see, what else? Michael, what was your question? Which is the safest to test blood or anything with the family? Biologically, I wonder if you're still there, if you're asking if you should do blood tests, if you are able to connect with your biological family. Personally, I think that if you do match with a biological family member through your adoption agency or through a birth search or personal investigator, I do feel like it may be a good choice to do a blood test to confirm DNA. Because for Korean adoptees, and again, we're a bit older and have a few more years of family reunions that have happened. There have been stories where some adoptees matched paperwork wise with a birth mother, and they've had a reunion and it's come back that they were not a biological match and that there was a mix up. So I think it is important to do a DNA test if you do match biologically with a birth parent through your search. It's also really interesting now because with like 23andMe and all that kind of stuff, it's possible that some people might find biological family members through those websites as well, which has happened. I know domestically it's happened a little bit more than for transnational adoptees. But let's see. What else? It's so weird because you're all really quiet because you're on mute because you're nice. But
everyone, if you want to take yourself off mute, is that okay, Sam?
yeah, that would be.
Yeah, everyone, you feel free to take yourself off mute and you can ask questions verbally too.
Yeah. Let's do that. I feel like
Hi.
Or if you
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you think was, besides going to the Hulk conference, was the most memorable experience that you had when you went back to Korea with Anise?
I think meeting our foster parents was one of the most memorable experiences that we had ever had. Because it's just kind of, not only did it fill in a little bit of the narrative of what had happened to us before, but it was just this really moving and powerful reminder for us that we've been taken care of and loved even before we even knew what was going on in the world, before we even knew that we were human, you know? And that was really cool. And for Korean adoptees, there is a bit of a structure that exists in terms of adoption. So I thought that was a really, really cool experience. But on top of that, I think going to Korea, and it was really special. Like I felt a connection to Korea being there. And even though I definitely felt like an American and I definitely felt a little bit like an outsider, I was really able to fall in love with the country even more. And every time I go back, I fall in love with it more. So I think being there and just kind of looking around and like seeing that place was really, really special. And then the food, and then there's food. That's also part of it. That's so cool, Maggie. You were adopted with your sister.
Yeah, I was adopted with my identical twin.
That's so cool.
I've like slowly been trying to like meet other twins. I think there's like 6 sets of twins that we've been talking about being adopted with, which has been really fun to do.
That is so cool. My friend, I don't know, some of you might have watched Dan Matthews. He did a documentary as well, so he actually found out at the same time that I did that we were both identical twins, and he found his brother as well.
That's so cool.
It's super cool. And they're both rappers. It's like the coolest thing. But Dan's brother was kept with his biological family, and was raised with the family. His birthday too was actually like a few days before he was already celebrating his birthday. That was on his records. It's pretty fun. Dan and I are super close. We obviously have like a very relationship with each other as well, because we share this really bizarre kind of thing that happened in our life. And his story is different because he does have his connection now with his birth family, and he spends time with them, and he doesn't really speak Korean that well, but I think now he's finally gonna try to learn. We were thinking about doing like a tutoring online together to both try and learn Korean, but it's crazy. I think there's there might be more twins in the world that were separated than we would maybe think imaginable, and siblings as well. Pretty cool. It's like life has all these Easter eggs all around the world, and Oh, cool. But that's awesome that you grew up with your sister. That's such a cool experience because it's, it's funny, like we're talking about like imagining what the other side would have been like for my sister and I.
I think it's interesting to have like, because we each have our own like narratives in our head and they don't match each other, even though it's the same one. So it's like, who's right, who's wrong? We don't know.
Oh, that's so
Or you
interesting.
probably get that with like Anise too, since like you have your different narratives, even though same birth parent.
We do, but also I think that the doctor who did all of our twin studies, Dr. Nancy Siegel, she always talks about that the second that you meet, you kind of start to divert from each other, and you kind of adjust and all of that, and you start playing off of each other a lot. So she said that the fact that we met so late in life after we had kind of gone through puberty and all that kind of stuff, we were actually really, really similar. And we did like aptitude testing, and it was literally like parallel. Everything was parallel. Our strengths are the same, our weaknesses are the same. So I think maybe since we didn't have growing up as kids and fighting against each other in that way or different viewpoints, and since we didn't grow up in the same culture, it was actually like we're super, super similar, like in like a scary way, because we didn't have interference from the other stuff. But I always wonder, I feel like my sister and I were talking about this the other day, right? I bet if we grew up together we would fight a lot because we feel the same way about certain things, but sometimes like you're saying, like sometimes you think about it differently a little bit, but like at the root of who we are, we're the same. We just want like the world to be happy and kind, but sometimes we get about it in different ways. So I feel like, yeah, it'd be interesting. Like, did you fight when you were growing up?
Yeah, we each have our battle wounds.
Did you share your stuff?
No, 2 sets of everything.
Ah. Yeah. Did you want to have the same things or no?
We always had the same things, just in different colors. We didn't like being viewed as a match set, but I think since moving apart, it kind of gets us closer because, like, when you come together, as you were saying, like, you tend to, like, diverge in, like, unity, but then when you go away, it becomes a little easier.
So cool. I have so many questions for you, but anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to monopolize you. Please get back to me. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
No, that's great. This is such a cool experience for me because you're actually the first identical twin that I've met that's been adopted together. So this is really cool for me. Because it's so interesting, because again, like I said, we always imagine what life would have been like, but Anise and I don't really talk about our childhood even, really. Not that we're ignoring it, not that we like are hiding anything or are ashamed of it or anything, but we actually just don't. We kind of just picked up where we left off. Like we left the womb and then we picked up 25 years later and was like, we've known each other for our entire lives. So for some reason we don't go back and really talk about that stuff. It's just randomly she'll email me and be like, wait, I don't know. And being, there's a lot of women in this chat, but being women, and be like, when did you get your period? Like stuff like that, that we missed all of those things growing up. So it's like fun to kind of go back and talk about those things. But I think I can imagine my sister and I actually, it seems like we're really nice, but we both are kind of hot-headed sometimes. And I feel like we would have gotten, if we were growing up together and going through puberty at the same time, we might have murdered each other. But yeah, what other questions do you have, or anyone else have has anyone else been able to do any type of birth family reunions or sibling reunions or anything?
I did 23andMe a few years ago, and last year I was able to meet my second cousin, and she was adopted to a family in Kentucky. So we actually met up, and she was super sweet. But she's like 13 and I'm 23. So we're at very different points in our lives, but hopefully like as we grow up, we can still like have each other.
Wow, that's so cool. It's so interesting too that your second cousin was also adopted.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah.
That's super cool. Has anyone else done 23andMe? Have you all done 23andMe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it too. It's pretty fun. My sister and I actually messed up our first one because we thought we could fit in the same tube. And then we realized that that was wrong and we had to do it again. And the results came back. They're like, you're identical twins. We're like, yeah, well, we know that. Yeah, the 23andMe is cool. You know, it is kind of, I don't know if anyone else feels like it as an adoptee, it's a pretty cool tool to have because like people say, oh, like for me, they're like, oh, you're adopted from Korea, so you must be Korean. And I always was curious, like, well, what if that's not my whole story, you know, like what if I'm not? And it was like kind of cool to be like, oh, it'd be interesting to see. And when we got it back, now it's just like, yeah, we're like 96% Korean, so we're pretty Korean. And very little of anything else. But do you all feel like it's kind of a cool thing to have access to 23andMe? Or you feel like health-wise, like I always remember filling out forms at a doctor's office. It was like family history, and it's always like this funny thing to just draw an X or a non-available if they ask as though I forgot to add it in. You know, it's like, no, I'm just adopted, so I don't know. And I feel like then, you know, as we get older and friends are like, oh, I have to get checked for breast cancer, it runs in my family and all of that kind of stuff, or other types of things that we're just like, oh, we don't know. I don't know. Do you feel like that gives you any sort of relief to maybe see potentially what to look out for and not have to, you know, have like a little bit of something to fill out when you do those forms and stuff like that? Do you feel like that 23andMe, are you grateful to have that kind of test? A bit, yeah. That's super cool. Did anyone have anything surprising on their 23andMe?
So I did 23andMe I did like 6 years ago, and I didn't like find anything, but then like last year or like 2 years ago, one of the girls I was adopted with, we like still keep in touch. She texted me and she was like, go look at your 23andMe. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I did, and like our DNA ended up matching. We're like third cousin, so it's kind of far. It's kind of far apart, but it was still kind of crazy because the odds of like ending up like matching DNA with someone that you'd like grown up with but like didn't really expect to be biologically related with was like kind of crazy. And I was just like, it was weird, but it was super cool because now we're like, actually, yeah, we are very far biologically related. I don't know, it was cool though.
Super cool. It's funny how people are always drawn to each other, you know. Some people are just naturally drawn to each other, and it's fun to find out that there is a reason for that as well.
Yeah.
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Tips for nosy people who ask too much. You know, I actually deal with a lot of this now more as an adult than I did when I was growing up. I think I think it's okay to say if you are uncomfortable and you just don't want to talk about it, because again, like as like the chats that we're having about society, like it's not necessarily our place to have to educate another person. So I think that if you aren't comfortable and you don't feel like you want to share that information, I think it's okay to say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable talking about this right now. And that's something that I personally deal with a lot because I want to appease other people, but generally also like I do like to share a lot of information. Sometimes I give too much and I tell really personal things that maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. But I think if you're uncomfortable, I think it's okay to have the strength and the power to say, you know what, I don't really feel like talking about that right now. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But I also know that if you feel like you are willing to give up that information and you feel like this person actually is coming from a place of interest, or because maybe, sometimes people are like, oh, well, I just want to say because like my sister's adopted or something like that, so I felt a connection. And sometimes, you can tell sometimes a person's kind of motivation for why they're saying things to you. And I think that, I think sometimes you can just take it case by case. And I know a lot of the times I will say, I just tell them exactly how it is because I'm comfortable doing that. But I also have friends who are like, I just wish you would stop asking me, and it's like, especially personal questions, like when people say the annoying stuff, like, I'm sure we've all heard this, like, well, you're a real mom and stuff like that. It's like, whoa, stop right there, because that's not the term. A biological mom, a real mom. What's a real mom? Like, that's subjective. My real mom. I have so many moms, and like I even have like my identical twin sister's mom. So that's not the right term. If you're asking about my biological mother, it's kind of a sensitive topic, but I haven't been able to reconnect with her. But also know that it's okay to tell people to put a limit on that and say, like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this right now. And I know, like, some people, I was working in a restaurant for a long time, and people were like, is Sam's your name? I was like, yeah, my name's Sam. And they're like, so is that like short for something because people can't pronounce your real name? And I was like, no, my name's Sam. It's short for Samantha. Like, you're from here, I'm from here. You can pronounce that. I know you can pronounce that. And it was just like, I remember getting annoyed by that and thinking like, and I was getting a question like that, or like the where are you from question. And I was getting that question so often. And I was also like, I guess a little bit taken aback by the audacity of people and how they're just like so comfortable. And also, again, we were talking about society nowadays, and people say like, where are you from? Assuming that you're not from here. That's a complex and deep rooted thing that we have in the US, but I think like those questions like that, I was getting them so often that eventually I just said, I don't feel like comfortable talking about this right now. And it's just like the end of it. That's kind of long-winded, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't know about any of you. I mean, do you get, I feel like a lot of you probably do get those questions, don't you? A lot. The where are you from? And oh yeah, the what's your Asian name? It's funny. I mean, I hope that in the future, that we can, that people will learn and kind of educate themselves more about it. I mean, that's something that I'm also dedicated to, and kind of why my sister and I do talk about and speak out about adoption and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's like the thing, like, I'm going to take the high road here, and I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, because sometimes, like, people have never met an adopted person. Like, on the rare occasion that they have never met an adopted person, I feel like, I'm going to take the high road, and I'm going to, because I'm comfortable, I feel like I can educate you on a situation. But also sometimes I don't want to do it, and I just say, no, I'm not going to have this conversation with you. Yeah. Oh yeah, people sometimes, people expect you to be white because your name. Yeah, I get that too. Sam Futerman. People think I'm like a Jewish boy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, no, I'm not. It's funny, but yeah. Anything else? Did I miss any other questions? I'm not great at this.
Yeah, awesome. I think we can take one more question, but I do want to be mindful of time.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone have a burning question? Or anything they would just simply like to say to Sam? Don't all jump in at once. Olivia?
Yeah, I guess. I just want to, oh gosh, it was okay. I want to say thank you for sharing, I guess, how much of a positive outlook you have on your adoption, because I know for some people it can be very negative, but I'm really glad that you're able to share how you are able to look so positively on it, because I think it can be a really beautiful, miraculous kind of thing, and I really appreciate you sharing that message with other people, and that you're so open about sharing your adoption. I think that's super special, and not a lot of people are comfortable with doing that. So, yeah.
Thank you. And also, like, that, thank you so much for saying that. I think that although I am a person who looks very positively towards adoption, I'm also aware that not a lot of people do. And I think that for those of you who don't, I just want to let you know that that's okay. You know what I mean? That's like a totally valid response to adoption as well. And you don't have to agree with the things that I say. And like, even more so if you say like, oh, you know what, I hear what you're saying, but I actually think differently on it. That's really important too, because we all don't have to feel the same way about everything. You can be like, you know what, I disagree with everything you say, and I'll be like, okay, and that's fine too. And also it's like, we can always educate each other. Like, that's why it's important to have these conversations and to talk about it. Like, I can give you my viewpoint, but in the end, what does that really matter? What matters is what's inside of you and how you feel. So my experience isn't going to be the same as anyone else's, and your experience isn't going to be the same as the next person, the person after that. So know that if you had a bad experience with adoption, that's okay. And also know that there is potential for things to change, and that like, you don't always have to say, oh, this is how I view adoption, and I'm always going to feel that way, because that might not always be the case. Like, I might not always feel this way about my birth family situation. The truth is, like, I might not. Like, if I find out information tomorrow about it, I could be devastated, and my sister too. But again, it's thinking about like accepting our feelings about it, because it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to not understand. It's okay to not get along with people and do all those things. That's okay. And then it's also good to know that that isn't the only option. Like, we can feel that way. We have to accept that. And then we can move on and make that conscious change. Like, we rewire our brains when we think a different way. Like, if I know I'm mad about something and it's really bugging me, I say, you know what, I'm going to choose to not be mad about that today, and see where it takes you. But know that everything that you feel is valid. And when someone says you shouldn't feel this way, that's not the case. You're allowed to feel however you feel about a situation, and whether it's good or bad. But know that there is a possibility that can change, and you can also have your own power to make it change.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam. Can we all unmute ourselves and
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
On all your engagements and stuff. And you know that we have our favorite activity right now, a group picture.
Oh, right, a group photo.
Right, so if you want to turn on your cameras, we're going to take a group photo with Sam. Thank you so much, Sam, for doing this.
Oh, no, thank
sharing your
you.
story.
I'm sorry, I feel like I could have just chatted with you all like all day.
That's just the whole camp.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fun.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, page 1. And then 1, 2, 3, page 2. Yay!
Awesome.
Oh, wait, I just wanted to say one thing, because I just noticed that someone said in the chat that sometimes it's hard to relate to your parents. And you know what? Sometimes it is hard to relate to our parents. And I'm an adult now, and I'm talking to my parents, and my parents are really open to having this discussion on not only racism and my adoption, but we have like a lot of free-flowing conversations, and I know I'm lucky in that sense. And sometimes parents aren't really open to talking about it. But also know that you have a large community to lean on, and especially with Adoptee, you have a lot of other people to talk to about that. And there's always people that you can talk to, even just about the frustration that a parent might not listen, or they're not hearing you, or not hearing what they're saying. That doesn't mean that your opinion or your viewpoint or your emotions are wrong or disqualified. You have a community of people surrounding you, and I just want that's important for everyone to know that you are not alone. And if someone's telling you that what you're feeling isn't justified, know that there's other people in the world who feel exactly the same way that you are feeling. So know that you're not alone, and there's always people for you to talk to. Okay, anyway, that's all. Have a fun rest of your camp day, and
Awesome.
tomorrow goes well.
Thanks for helping us end day 2 on such a great note.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you all
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Sam.
Bye, Sam. Thank you.
Bye.